back, it's me, Crystal Sky. How are y'all doing today? And today we're gonna be doing the continuation of Beyond the Isle of the Lost Wonderland. Last time we read page 10, page 1 to 10, and today we're gonna be reading page 11 to page 20. So let's begin. 2 other soldier carts hefted the entire dessert table and tipped everything into the koi pond. Luckily, it was an unkoi pond, so there were no fish to be harmed. Everything happened in quick succession and very effectively. In no more than a moment or two, the distressing situation was dealt with. The Queen of Hearts brushed her hands out brusquely as though she had touched something unpleasant. "One more thing," she said. The Queen now boomed directly at her daughter, and though Red was not afraid of her mother's duckdums, usually just annoyed by them, she felt a ripple of unease in her stomach. "You're all familiar with our triumph in the War of the Roses." "Indeed," the unparty-goers murmured dutifully. "The War of the Roses, hear, hear." It was the first and most important topic taught at Wonderland's schools. How Wonderland chose not to join the United Kingdom of Oradon, and how the Queen raised an army to maintain its freedom. And so Oradon locked up the rabbit hole and closed Wonderland off from the rest of the kingdom in fear. And I know how much you love the annual Wonderland tea ceremony to be held in 2 weeks' time. That commemorates our important history as well as heralds the royal decree for the upcoming year. We have had some noteworthy decrees in years past. The year that raised the stakes on the National Croquet Leagues by introducing a red heart beheading. The one that impressed all kittens and puppies until they were permanently trained, or the unforgettable year we banned dancing of any kind, the Queen of Hearts continued. But this year, I'm happy to announce that the ceremony will be a special one, for it is when my own daughter, Red of Hearts, will be given the royal decree. An obligatory cheer erupted from the crowd. Royal subjects rushed forward to congratulate Red, and the soldier cars shuffled together in a stiff salute. Red nodded and smiled faintly, but inside it felt like she would have gotten the wind knocked out of her. She always knew she would take on more regular duties, but this was throwing her in the deep end. The decree at the Wonderland tea ceremony was a big one, containing a collection of rules, regulations, and goals for the upcoming year. It set the tone for the kingdom, and now she would not only be responsible for coming up with these new strict laws, but announcing them in a fancy speech. Ren made her way to her mother, who was applauding deftly in her elbow-length red gloves. "Are you sure? Already?" Red asked beneath the noise of the crowd. Of course," her mother crowded. "If anything, we have waited too long. I know it's such a big responsibility." "Don't worry." The Queen reached out and pinched Red's cheek, teasing but affectionate, because she knew how it annoyed Red. "We'll have more than enough time to prepare, and I'll be with you every step of the way." "Okay," Red nodded. The thought of the Queen turning the harsh light of her full attention on Red and nitpicking all the while did not exactly comfort Red. "And once you take this on, you will be ready for more royal duties before you know it. We will be just like me, better than ever before." The Queen flashed a wide smile before Red could respond, then clapped and cried, "Guards!" The soldier carts fell into 2 neat and perfect lines behind her, and soon the garden looked just as it had before. She had made her entrance. All the royal subjects turned immediately back to their own games as meticulously as figures in a cuckoo clock. All but one, of course. Only Red noticed that the uneaten dessert slowly turned to mush in the pond. Chapter 3. Rebel Roses. Red had lost all interest in the unparty. She exited through another path in the hedge maze, traveling portal to the stilly castle that sat at the center. The maze was both directive and tragic. A landscape feature that mirrored the Queen's desire for neat beauty as well as her inner her landlady and a mechanic that kept intruding out. Many a suspicious character got stranded in the maze's outer perimeter, which made Red laugh. That was child's play. The closer you got to the castle, the more complex the pattern became, with dead ends and switchbacks, paths that spiraled in on themselves over and over again, but the citizens of Wonderland knew how to navigate the hedge. And no one knew them better than Red, who would spend the majority of her childhood wandering them and figuring out all the shortcuts. For being the daughter of the Queen of Hearts didn't exactly make Red popular. Sure, she had all the influence in the land. She could have snapped her fingers and had companies by her side in a moment. But who wanted that? It was better to be alone and focus on yourself than to be with people who secretly didn't like you. That was what Red's mother said, at least. The Queen of Hearts discouraged friendship, and though sometimes Red wondered what it would be like to have someone around with whom she could really talk, she guessed it was for the best. Most of the Wonderland kids were intimidated by Red and her mother. Red didn't exactly blame them, but she could have appreciated someone to talk to right now. Red wandered ahead with nowhere to go, and no one to consult about the Queen's pronouncement. In one corner of the maze there was a grand old tentum tree that rose above the surface of the hedge and stretched toward the castle's towers. When Red climbed to its highest branch, she could see over the twisting pattern of green and black and white checkerboard of the garden, the gates at the edge of the maze, and on to the rest of Wonderland. It was her favorite spot and hers alone. Now Red looked over the drift and curious world that would soon be directly affected by her words, her choices, her actions. It was a city of pink and red buildings covered in clever shadowed decorations of hearts, spades, diamonds, and clubs. This had been home for all of Red's 16 years of life, but did she really feel any affection toward it? Red wrapped her arms around the tentum tree and thought of the strict rules and extraneous soldier cards, the dull afternoon of garden parties, and the lack of personality in nearly everyone she met. Red let out a disappointed sigh as she acknowledged how easy the answer was. No, she couldn't find much in Wonderland to care about, at least not the way she would have expected it. And the prospect of ruling over it felt equally grim, but perhaps that was the right thing. The Queen of Hearts often said that if you cared about something too much, it would get taken away. Red had learned this the hard way with a few stuffed animals and later hobbies over the years. She would never recover her sewing machine from the bottom of the mound where the Queen had thrown it, after outlawing anyone but the kingdom's authorities' tailors from making their own clothes. You'll be just like me, her mother had said. Red pushed her wavy hair away from her face irritably and worked it into a half braid. Red was perhaps the only one in Wonderland not intimidated by the Queen of Hearts. But she didn't understand her mother either. The Queen was aloof and cold. Red tensed every morning at the breakfast table when she heard her mother coming down the stairs, trying to gain what kind of mood the Queen was in by the constance of her footsteps. Could it be that the power had well gone to the Queen's head? Would Red turn out the same way once she was Queen? Would this be the beginning of her end? Would she never ever have any fun? In the far distance, Red could see the murky shape of the dismal mare, with its wimpy and moth-covered depths. Beyond that, she knew, was the endless tulgey woods, and somewhere even further lay the closed-up entrance to the rabbit hole. Red had never once been outside Wonderland. Whenever she brought up the idea to her mother, the Queen snorted, rolled her eyes, and said, "I have worked hard to make Wonderland the best of the best. These are other piddly kingdoms, just a mess of people running willy-nilly, shouting their opinions and complaining about this, that, and other. Just dreadful." She shook her head as always and pursed her lips. "Here people are so calm and well-behaved. Why would you go anywhere else?" But Red couldn't help wonder. What would it be like to visit the other parts of the world? She had even heard rumors that there was once an island that host all the villains of folklore, a dreadful and dangerous place where nobody followed any rules at all and everyone did whatever they wanted. The Isle of the Lost. It all sounded perfectly wonderful to Red. But speaking at this most important tea ceremony would mean she was publicly showing her loyalty to the throne bound to Wonderland forever. From the top of the tentum tree, she could see the now empty checkered garden, where a lone soldier cart was removing the dessert mash from the pond with a net. Where was the boy who had stolen the tarts now? Was he in the dungeon? Red stood balancing on the rough bark of the tentum tree. She could not issue any kind of new horrible royal decree at the Wonderland tea ceremony. She simply couldn't. The prospect made it seem like Red's life would be over, and really she hadn't even truly begun to live. The light of the setting sun hit Red's face, and she thought it over. It wasn't enough to just sneak out after curfew and sabotagely swap a sword or a helm here and there. The girl wanted to train after all. Like the boy who had taken the forbidden tarts, Red could take what she wanted, because somewhere before Red, just out of reach, was the equal tensing possibility of life out from under her mother's thumb. She began to climb down from the tree with new strength in her arms, eyeing the rigid line of soldier cars as they fled out from the evening watch. "I'm going to light this place up," she told herself as her foot touched the neat lawn of the hedged maze once more, "if it's the last thing I do." Chapter 4. The Science of Magic. In Red's recommended and meticulous schedule as the daughter of the Queen of Hearts, there was one particular spot of brightness which ironically ran contrary to what might be seen as rebellious. School. In Wonderland, school was in session most days, even most holidays. Maybe they could have a day off tomorrow or a day off yesterday, but never a day off today. Wonderland High was just as tightly run and ordinary as anywhere else within the Queen's domain, but at least here the high uniform window let in plenty of sunlight. The school was housed in an old manor near the Duchess's mansion and had her house. It was far enough from home to afford Red a pleasant walk every day, despite the essential squeaking of the moon's rafts, and Red's favorite class at Wonderland High by far was science. For its rules, though just as strict and inflexible as her mother's, at least made sense. When the Queen of Hearts stabbed her toe, she might outlaw raincoats. If a servant spilled her soup, the Queen would demand that nobody say the word Tuesday ever again. But if Red held a tart in mid-air and dropped it, it would fall to the ground no matter what. An invulnerable steed would stop a rolling hedge every time. There was something very smoothing about these laws that did not follow Red's mother's logic, but the inferable readable of the universe instead. Red was still a bit distracted when she walked into class that morning, wondering how she might go about being more rebellious. It wasn't until she was nearly bumped into her teacher that she came to her senses. "Princess," said Mr. Hatter, chuckling and sidestepping her, "we have our head in the tentum tree again, haven't we?" Mr. Hatter, who performed to drop the formality and go simply by Maddox, cut a straining figure in his plaid top hat, purple hair, and olive green leather trench coat worn on top of a pinstriped wool suit. He was the emphatic of dapper, none other than the Mad Hatter's son himself. Maddox had chosen a more enigmatic route over Multony and was. Alright guys, so for now that is everything. We read page 11 to page 20 today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and like I said in my last video, if you guys noticed any hints or Easter eggs, feel free to share them in the comments. Or if you want to, keep the Easter eggs to yourself. See you guys next time.